I'm going to deviate from the trajectory that I've been following up to now with Badiou's The Immanence of Truths. So far, I've been following, in a linear fashion, the book, but I want to interrupt that for this chapter and study another example that Badiou uses of his trajectory that comes not from the book but from the original seminar over which he elaborated the ideas for the book. So the example is a poem of Rimbaud's called Youth. Badiou quotes and analyzes it in the first class of his seminar on the immanence of truths. It's from the 24th of October 2012, and he says, he goes through first basically the ideas that he goes through in the first two sections of the written book, the Immanence of Truths, summarizing the ideas of the traits of immanence and the characteristics of truth and their relations. And then he says, I would like to begin as a sort of musical introduction by a poetic short circuit. I would like to have a recourse to the poem so that it may indicate to us in advance the legitimacy of this trajectory, the trajectory that he's going to follow in the book, which is basically an inventory of finitude, then the hard work of, in Badiou's book, the hard work is the hard work of going through the mathematics of the higher infinites and reaching the absolute, and then coming back down to earth and drawing consequences in terms of the new subjectivity that we create by confronting the higher infinites. So that's his trajectory, and it's also the trajectory that Rimbaud is going to indicate in this poem, although the hard work that belongs to the trajectory will not be mathematical but poetical. So Badiou says, if I talk about a poetic short circuit, this is because poetry is that which in thought goes the fastest, with the greatest speed. So indirectly, that's a callback to Deleuze and the idea of attaining absolute speed in thought. And Badiou's idea is to attain absolute speed, we need, in his case, the mathematical foundation, and nonetheless, it's the poetic side of philosophy that goes with the fastest speed and perhaps even the absolute speed, because it draws on the absolute speed of poetry. So I'm going to read the poem little by little and look at Badiou's analysis and maybe say a little more than he does, because it's he just treats it in a short ending to the seminar. The poem So youth is from Illuminations. It's divided into 4 parts: Sunday, sonnet, 20 years, and then a conclusion that has no name. I will deal, as Badiou does, with each part separately, but I'll give Badiou's philosophical title, or the philosophical theme that he finds for each part. So the first part, Sunday, Badiou describes the world, the ordinary world, the world without exception, so without infinity, the finite world. 2, sonnet, describes the world that is worked through by an exception. 3, 20 years, is the world as seen by the nostalgia for the sensible, for the senses. And 4 is the world as seen by way of the creation of a new subjectivity. So that's the way he divides it up. If you read it without any guidelines, it's complicated. It's one of Rimbaud's most complicated poems, and it can seem sort of like all sorts of things in fragments, just sort of put together. But Badiou's extracting out a theme, an overarching theme for each part, gives us already a framework for reading and understanding the poem. So first I'll read part 1, Sunday. It's my translation. Calculations aside, the inevitable descent from the sky and the visit of memories and the session of rhythms occupy the dwelling, the head, and the world of the mind. A horse bolts on the suburban turf, along fields and woodlands, blighted with carbonic plague. A miserable woman in some drama, somewhere in the world, sighs for improbable surrender. Desperados long for storms, drunkenness, and wounds. Little children stifle curses alongside the rivers. Let us resume our studies to the sound of the all-consuming work that gathers and rises among the masses. That's the end of the first part. Badiou tells us that the first part, Sunday, is typically a description of the ordinary world, one in which there is in no way any exception. So it's Charleville-Mézières, the little town where Rimbaud grew up, on a Sunday morning. We find successively and apparently by chance a horse, a woman, some adventurers, and some children, which compose a tableau or a painting or an image of ordinary provincial life. Once this description has been made, that finishes abruptly with, let us resume our studies. Badiou adds that the theme of study is fundamental in Rimbaud's work, and it's a term by which he designates the profound or deep experience of the world. So that means the description of this ordinary provincial life or world is a description of the superficial world, and study that Rimbaud takes up in the conclusion of this part is the return to a deeper experience of this world. In particular, it's an experience of the possibility of an immanent exception. Study, according to Badiou, is that which plunges you into the truth of this world, of which we have had up to now just the description of its superficial charm. So Badiou stops his analysis there for the first part, but maybe we can say some more. I think this is a good place to one, to make Badiou's concepts a little more concrete and imaginable. In the first two sections of the introduction, he's given a political example with the notions of the power set having more, so the set of all the subsets having enormously greater number than the set of with its number of elements. So he talked about the difference between the vote and social movements. He's developed a mathematical example with this whole idea of the proof of the power set theorem and analysing indirect proof by reductio ad absurdum, and the difference in types of proof necessary for the infinite case and the finite case. He's analysed so that's mathematics, politics, love with the example of jealousy as the nihilist version of love under the conditions of finitude, and the creation of love as an open work, which is the infinite version of love. And he hasn't given a poetic example. Later, a little later, he'll begin with a poetic example in the main body of the book. But I wanted to give a poetic example. This is what he did in opening his seminar on the immanence of truths. And I think it's a good place to see the relation between Deleuze and Badiou. Deleuze appeals to Rimbaud a lot too, and there is my conjecture that the schizo process in Deleuze is what corresponds to the truth, the subjectivation at least, of the truth process in Badiou. So the first part, the world without exception, Sunday morning. Why does it say it's the morning? I don't know. We know other treatments of Sunday morning being boring. I would say, because it's an important point that will come up in the other parts, that this is the inventory of finitude. It's the normal world. It's the Oedipal world as well. All desire, all creation is contained, repressed, blocked off. So in a way, it's the world of re-Oedipalization, because it begins with a fall. Calculations set aside. So calculations we're going to see can be either sort of the algorithms of finitude, but when taken up in a truth process can be part of, as with the inventories that we must realize, can be part of taking us into a truth process. But anyhow, calculation set aside, the inevitable descent from the sky. So we're getting a descent or a fall as if there had been a prior case of or state of creativity. So maybe there's going to be this sort of repeated process of creation and so ascent and fall into finitude, or maybe this prior state is a projection on a temporal axis of something that's intrinsic to life in this world, but it begins with the inevitable descent from the sky and the visit of memories. So that's in the finite world, we're stuck in the imaginary in Lacan's sense. They're familiar images that come from memory. They're not creative images. And the session of rhythms that occupy the dwelling, the head, and the world of the mind. So here, it seems to be using rhythm, not in the sense of some creative music, but just sort of a rhythmic beat, a set of habits that occupy the world of the mind. And here we're stuck in the head, in the world of the mind, and not fully in the world itself. We see a horse that bolts and runs across the fields and the woodlands. This horse is blighted with carbonic plague. So the horse there is sort of the worker in the mines who has had his lungs blighted by the particles of dust that he inhales as he's worked to death like a workhorse in the mines, and it creates these lung diseases. So already we've got an idea of the stiflingness of the world of finitude. A miserable woman in some drama, almost we could say a drama queen, somewhere in the world, sighs for improbable surrender. So this world of finitude is the world of sad affects, the miserable woman, and nonetheless she's sighing for improbable, so outside the normal calculated probabilities, a sort of wondrous event, a miracle to which she can surrender. So despite the passivity and so on, this goes with Badiou's point that we are never totally closed up in the world of finitude. We are never totally sad or totally evil. Despite being closed up as much as oppressive power can enclose us, we still universally have a capacity for infinity, for escaping from this world of finitude, for following a line of flight, in fact. And we have this desire for infinity. The same point applies to desperados long for storms and drunkenness and wounds. So the desperados are another sign of energy, but they're the bad boys. But all they can dream of, we're in a world of low intensity, the world of finitude, and of sad affects, and the miserable woman and the desperados are longing for, sighing for the high intensity that comes from a relation between the finite and the infinite. the little children stifle curses alongside the rivers. So the little children, we said that the horse is the image of the worker as workhorse. The child is an image of innocence, and there's this same theme of stifling, of a stifling atmosphere, of being unable to breathe, of stifled desire. The children are there alongside the rivers, which is sort of the flow, the line of flight, but they can't follow the line of flight. Everything is enclosed. So you can bolt like a horse and sort of run and go nowhere, but you can't escape. The second part, which Badiou calls the world with the work of exception, is called sonnet. I would say that the first one, first part Sunday, has a fall, the inevitable descent from the sky, and this part has an ascent. Man of ordinary constitution, was the flesh not a fruit hung in the orchard? O childish days, the body a treasure to spend and expend. O to love, Psyche's peril or strength. Earth had slopes fertile in princes and artists, and descendants and race drove us to crime and mourning. The world, your fortune and your peril. But now that labour is rewarded, you, your calculations, you, your impatience, are no more than your dance and your voice, neither fixed nor forced, though the double consequence of success and invention, plus a reason, with discrete and fraternal humanity, in the imageless universe, strength and right reflect the dance and the voice only now appreciated. I want to go back. The transition between the two parts is one that I didn't comment on. It says, let us resume our studies to the sound of the all-consuming work that gathers and rises among the masses. So already we're talking about work that gathers and rises. So we're preparing the ascent, and it's us instead of it's a plural. It's not the solitude of the poet, which prepares the collective idea at the end of part 2 with fraternal humanity, and the idea is the work, the real solid work, whatever that is, we shall see, will let us rise above or away from finitude. So I read sonnet. Badiou says the second part, sonnet, deals with the possible relation between the immediacy of bodies in the poem Dance and the Voice, and reason. So we're getting this possible relation between bodies and reason. These bodies, which are there, these agreeable things or pleasant things that one sees, can have a relation with reason that Rimbaud calls un labeur comblé, satisfied work. I called it labour rewarded. There's also almost an idea like virtue is its own reward, that labour, true work, creative work is its own reward. Anyhow, reason is labour, but a labour which contains in an immanent fashion its own reward. So that's what I just said. Rimbaud does not conclude, according to what usually depicts him as being, Rimbaud does not conclude by the immediacy of the sensible, the violence of bodies, etc. Rimbaud is a great rationalist, and I would even say a violent rationalist. Rimbaud concludes, force and right reflect the dance and the voice only now appreciated. So force and right are components of reason, and they can reflect immediate sensibility, the dance and the voice, and even it is only when the dance and the voice are reflected by reason that they can really be appreciated. This form of happiness, which consists in appreciating the sensible, and which is the most ordinary definition of happiness, cannot be appreciated, according to Rimbaud, or can only be appreciated, according to Rimbaud, if it is taken up in the figure of satisfied work or rewarded labour, taken up in satisfied work in study, as we saw in the first part, that is to say, in the work of the true. So, just as the first part was the inventory of finitude, the second part does have a little more of the inventory of finitude, but it's mainly an inventory of work and success. But now that labour is rewarded, your calculations, your impatience, that is to say, calculations and impatience, calculations and desire are transvalued into dance and your voice. Your calculations, your impatience are no more than your dance and your voice. So the immediate sensible or sensibility is being transvalued in this second part, where it's becoming poetic and noetic. We have a sort of, even here, a nostalgia for an old paradise. Was the flesh not a fruit hung in the orchard, O childish days? So that's the paradise of childhood that we saw maybe at the beginning of the first part, Sunday, with the inevitable descent. So there was some sort of fusional, pleasurable paradise when we had in our body all the energy necessary just to expend, spend, squander, shower forth our gifts, and there were dangers that pushed us into transgression and mourning, so into crime and mourning, so transgression and loss. But this spending forth was in the form of creative work in whatever field, and this labour was rewarded by success, the creation of dance and voice, so action free action and free speaking, dance and voice that is neither fixed nor forced. So it's mobile, it's not fixed in one place the way the world of finitude would like to fix us just in one place and that we not move from there. No exceptions. And it's not forced, it's not constrained by force, it's free. So we've managed to get to some sort of free creation and free action for the double consequence of success and invention, plus a reason. So this creation is mobile and free, true, but it's perhaps unstable, and it's combined with discrete and fraternal humanity. Discrete and fraternal humanity means we're not in the dramas of the drama queen. We've had breakthroughs, but we're now not in that sort of longing and trying to blow everything open. We've done it. So we can be non-dramatic about our creations, and we can be in service or care or link with other people in fraternal humanity in the imageless universe. So we saw that the world of finitude was the world where stuck in sort of familiar images of memories. We could almost say programmed images. So it's an imageless universe, not in the sense that we don't have poetic metaphors and thus images, but it's imageless in that we're out in the universe or the world, outside representation, outside imitation, outside these programmed images of memory, and we're in the world of desire and soul, psyche, so psyche and eros, of calculation and desire, of dance and voice, and whereas the world of finitude was unjust, people were sighing and longing to something to take them out of their miserable condition, but they had nothing. Here, we're in a world of justice, things are accomplished, and a world of attraction that can sort of overflow and attract other people into that same type of world. The third part is the nostalgia for the sensible, and I would call it the inventory of transient. So we've had the inventory of finitude, the inventory of work and success, or the inventory of breakthroughs, real successful breakthroughs. Now we have the inventory of transience. The instructive voices exiled, physical ingenuousness bitterly stale, adagio, the infinite egoism of adolescence, the studious optimism, how the world was full of flowers that summer, the airs and the forms dying, a chorus to calm impotence and absence, a chorus of glass with nocturnal melodies. Indeed, the nerves will quickly begin to hunt. I would add again, but Rimbaud doesn't say so. Badiou tells us the third part, he's really quick on the third part, which is short, but the third part, which is called 20 years or 20 years old, seems suddenly to go through a turn of 180 degrees in the nostalgia of the pure sensible. The egoism, the infinite egoism of adolescence, studious optimism, the world was full of flowers that summer. Okay, and he stops there. That's true, but I think there's more. There's a wheel of time going on. You've got another fall. There was a fall at the beginning of the first part, the fall into the descent from the sky and into the visit of memories and the session of rhythms that occupy the mind, and then all these images of low intensity, being trapped, sad affects, being stifled, bad boys and drama queens. Then there came the images of success, uniting desire and soul, acquiring dance and voice and transvaluing them with reason. Here, a second fall, the instructive voices exiled. So we had dance and voice. These are the instructive voices, and they're exiled. We're deprived of them again. Physical ingenuousness, that was all this talk about flesh, body as a treasure, able to spend its energy. Now we have physical ingenuousness has become bitterly stale. What's the reason? Well, I think the reason is that a level of infinity has been experienced, but so there's been a cracking and a breakthrough from the ideology of finitude, but it has been identified with the ego. So it doesn't go far enough. You need to combine this infinity not with the ego, but with something else. So the infinite egoism of adolescence. How full the world was of flowers. Now comes the thing. That's summer. So it's transient. It's sort of like the seasons of life, the repeat. The airs and forms dying, and a choir with nocturnal melodies, or a chorus with nocturnal melodies. So we have summer, but winter is coming. We have life, but the forms are dying. We have success, but that's the day world, and now night is coming. So we're unable to stabilize, if that's the right word, to consolidate our infinite breakthroughs. We need something more. Otherwise, we do it. We think we've done it. We finished our thesis. We've gotten a job. We've discovered our true love, and we've got married and founded a family. We've published a book of poems. We've created some sort of social change. And what happens, as Zizek says, the day after the revolution? Does everything just sort of fall back to normal, and we can reminisce about the good old days, or can some sort of consolidation come in? So part 4, well, the conclusion is we get this fall, it's described, and then Rimbaud concludes, indeed, the nerves will quickly begin to hunt. So once again, this sort of vital energy that is not the vitality of the cycle of life and the seasons, but this vitality that comes from a link to infinity will start mucking things up again. So part 4 is the new subjectivity, or the creation of a new subjectivity. I call it the inventory of change, because we haven't had true change up till now. Well, we sort of have and we haven't. So, an inventory of change. You are still at the temptation of Anthony, the antics of curtailed or interrupted zeal, the tics of puerile pride, the exhaustion and the terror. But you will set yourself to this work. All the harmonic and architectural possibilities will move round your seat. Your seat or your chair. Perfect unforeseen beings will offer themselves to your experiments. Around you will gather dreamily the curiosity of ancient crowds and the idle riches. Your memory and your senses will be simply the food or the nourishment for your creative impulse. As for the world, when you emerge, what will have become of it? What will the world have become? Nothing, in any case, of its present seeming. So, Badiou comments this at greater length. There's sort of two parts as far as Badiou is concerned. There's the condemnation of this sensible nostalgia that we saw in the third part, the nostalgia for youth and adolescence. We are falling, if we have this nostalgia, we sort of want to hang on to what we've achieved, and without sort of seeing that the work has to continue, we have to go further and further all the time. We're falling into the world of images again, the temptation of Saint Anthony, who in the desert saw visions of temptation. So we have to resist that nostalgia and not succumb to it. This world, as it is described in 4 terms which are perfectly suited to our world. The agitation of interrupted zeal. According to Badiou, that's the bustling, the zealous bustling of the world of wage slaves. So we're constantly bustling. So capitalism sort of appeals to this energy inside us. It makes us agitated, trying to do things, and interrupts the process all the time with rules, timetables, programs. You get all into something, and then it's finished, and you have to move on to something else, because that's the program. So you're constantly frustrated, and you're constantly interrupted in your process, and you're constantly exhausted. Badiou says we agitate ourselves, but for nothing. The tics of puerile pride. So that's the ego trying to take over all the energy for itself and all the successes for itself. That's the care of the self, the reign of the individual who imagines childishly that it is wonderful. The exhaustion, being tired, constantly tired and discouraged. Badiou says that's one of the defining features of contemporary subjectivity. So this constant incitement to agitation and interruption, which sort of leaves no room for the agitation to calm down. It sort of makes the agitation worse, and fatigue sets in. Terror, or that's fear. We are in a world where everyone is afraid of his or her own shadow, afraid of what is happening, afraid of the crisis, afraid that can things can turn out bad, things can go wrong. Badiou concludes this group of 4 terms constitutes the temptation to renounce all truth. So, because we have this agitation, this narcissism, this fatigue, and this constant anxiety, we're closed off from other possibilities. We just want things to be okay, or to get a little better, and little by little better, but we don't want, or we don't even know that we can want radical change, which a care for truth instead of a care for the ego would bring about. So that's the first part. Then there's always the ethical prescription in Rimbaud. In the first part it was let us resume our studies. In the second part, I don't know if there's a prescription, but it's all the way through, that you take your dance and your voice and you unite it with reason. So reason is study and the work of the creator. The third has a similar prescription at the end. The nerves will quickly begin to hunt. It's put in the form of a description, but there's a sort of affirmation in that description. That's a good thing. The head and the world of the mind might be satisfied with that, or kowtowed into accepting it, but the nerves will push us on. As Francis Bacon said in a quote that Deleuze really liked, he's cerebrally pessimistic, but nervously optimistic. And then now we have fourth example of roughly the same prescription, but you will set yourself to this work. It's a prescription or an admonishment, a self-admonishment, but it's with the you, so it's to everyone at the same time. Badiou comments, this is the movement which traverses all the work of Rimbaud of putting oneself in the disposition of not giving in to the temptations of the world, of the finite world, and of putting oneself to work, to science, to the work of science, to the work of the truth. And according to Badiou, Rimbaud gives this imperative of working for the truth a lot of names, and it's a question of setting oneself to the construction of something other than what the world asks of you. The world, in fact, asks of us to keep things, keep the machine working, and maybe when we can, relax and enjoy it. but to keep the machine working, and that's all. And don't break the machine, don't shake up the machine, don't shake things up, and certainly don't work on an idea, don't work on the truth. Accept the ideological fact that there's nothing else, there's no alternative. The truth as the creation of an alternative doesn't exist. So Badiou remarks that the sentence is in the future tense. You will put yourself to this work. So the future is the tense of truth. Truth is an infinite construction. Even when we're in the truth, we have to once again put ourselves into the truth, into the work of the truth. The work of truth, once it's created, it's still a question of creating new possibilities. And before even dreaming of realizing these possibilities, we must make sure that they're new. And so for that, we have to be there at their birth. We have to participate in the birth of the truths in whatever way we can participate. And that way, so it's truth in the making, not truth made, which is knowledge or institutions or finished states. We have to put ourselves constantly in movement, in truth in the making. And so make sure that we are realizing new possibilities and not just some version of the old possibilities. So all these harmonic and architectural possibilities will move or be moved, both are possible, around our seat. Can be sort of like a chair at a desk or a stool in a laboratory, or could be a much more metaphorical seat. Siège can be headquarters as well. So it's where the seat is, where the work is done. And you'll have a new appearance of being itself. I want to call that, you'll have a new paradigm. So in the Inventory of Success in part 2, you succeed and you're happy, but despite having used your relation to the infinite, the danger is that maybe you've just succeeded in doing one better within the existing paradigm. You haven't made sure that what you've done is a true change, a change of paradigm. Maybe you thought it was, maybe you felt it was, maybe the success seemed to show that the paradigm was changed, but part 3 warns us that that might be just a part of a cycle. You've changed things, but that's just the next step in the cycle anyhow, and is going to decline with the step after. So Badiou says, if we put ourselves to the labour of truths, the world will no longer be the same. So that's the idea. If you change your paradigm, you change the world, at least in some way, the perceived world, the world of possibilities. What will happen is you will be working on a point of universality because it's a truth. And because it's a point of universality, even if in some way, at some time, for some people, the work is solitary, it is in fact collective at the same time. So, according to the optimistic prediction of Badiou, people will come to you. There is a power of attraction in this work on the truth, and even the people of the old world will come out of curiosity and idleness and be attracted by all the sparks and shininess around the new paradigm, and may even be willing to convert and work on this new paradigm, set themselves to work. Your memory and your senses will only be the nourishment of your creative impulsion. What did I say? Creative impulse or drive, you could say as well. That means, as we talked about the world of images, of the imaginary, you don't wipe yourself out, you don't lobotomize yourself, and the world of the senses, in all the senses of senses, the world of successes that you have achieved, you don't wipe them out either, but you don't stop with them. They become the nourishment for your new creation. So they're preserved but sublated, if you want. So it's the work and the new creation of possibilities that is primary and that subordinates to itself the memories, the dreams, the partial successes. And when you emerge, where from, Badiou asks? From yourself, when you emerge from your ego, from the contemporary appearances or the present appearances of the world, summarized as Sunday morning in Charleville. That is to say, Badiou puts it up a level of concept to Plato. When you emerge from the cave or the cavern, inside which your creative impulse has no chance. So if you're stuck in the cave of finitude, even if you go off on your own somewhere and meditate or work, that leaves no place for your creative impulse. But if you create, if you manage to change the paradigm, ever so little, but even a little change that is a change of paradigm is a big change, you'll have a new subjectivity, and nothing will remain of present appearances, of the seemingly necessary order of things that constitutes the image we have of the present world. That will be gone. So Badiou says, rephrasing it, Rimbaud in my own terms, if you manage to establish yourself in the laborious immanence of truths, then the world will open to such radically new possibilities that the appearance itself of the world is totally modified. So I think there he took his time to analyze, and he said roughly everything that you could say. So the only thing that I could add is these are appearances that change. are a callback to the images, the temptations of Anthony, the images in the first part that are the memories, and the rhythms are sort of action images, if you want, and the images that you had in your nostalgia, and now you're going into what the second part in its conclusion called the imageless universe, because it's no longer a universe of imitation, but of experimentation, as he says in the fourth part. Perfect unforeseen beings will offer themselves to your experiments. So the old world will come, be attracted. Maybe they want to take advantage of you, see what sort of profits they can make, or maybe they'll be more than curious and want to sort of help out and participate. And as well, perfect. Well, perfect. He's being a little hyperbolic there. Unforeseen beings. We once again have this idea of calculation, like the calculation of probabilities as well, like the woman who sighs for improbable surrender. She wants a miracle. That's an event of high improbability, or very, very low probability, if you want. And these calculations are present only to make you aware of the fact that what you've got before you, once you change your paradigm, are totally unforeseen, unpredictable, improbable beings. So you've gone from the sort of weakened force, the failed force, the weakened power. We can look at it in terms of the power, this weakening, puerile pride, curtailed or interrupted zeal, and terror and fear, and sadness and sad affects. They're all reductions, diminutions of our capacity for the infinite, of our capacity to act in relation to the infinite. And if you do the work on the truth, once you are working, there's established a relation between the infinite and the finite. That's the immanence of truth in the finite infinite relation, and surprising things will start happening.